to our digital risk discussion brought to you by the fellows of SIM chapter in Dallas-Fort Worth and the SIM National DigiRisk Special Interest Group. I'm Caren Shiozaki, and I'm a proud member of the DFW Fellows, and I'm a co-founder of the SIG. I'm also the CIO of the Santa Fe-based mortgage company, and I'm a senior fellow with the Devine Center of Excellence for Digital Security and Risk. Today, I'm joined by my fellow SIMDFW member, Peter Vogel. He's an attorney with Foley and Lardner and a member of Foley's Privacy, Security, and Information Management and Technology Transactions and Outsourcing practices. And Peter was an IT practitioner before he decided to become a lawyer. So Peter, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Now, we all cloud today, and we like it for its scalability, efficiency, and flexibility. But unlike the old days when we had direct control over our IT operations infrastructure, today we rely very heavily on our cloud service providers. So it is imperative that we choose them very carefully. Now, I'm going to turn the mic over to Peter, who's going to give us some advice on how we should be vetting terms of services and click agreements when we are evaluating potential cloud service providers.
Thanks, Caren. It's a pleasure to be here for this broad podcast today, and I'm just excited that DFW and SIM DigiRisk put this together. Although everyone watching is well aware that the cloud itself, concept-wise, is not very new. I first ran into it, as many other people did, from Dartmouth timesharing in 1964, and I think everyone else also appreciates the fact that Google came up with or coined the term cloud in 2006. So it's just a marketing term. But I think what has changed is that we are now in a position where, as I think Caren pointed out, we are in fewer and fewer operations that are on-prem. Everything is moved to the cloud, at least in some part or other, and most every business is impacted by it. Let me also make a point, just so everyone watching would appreciate. Before I studied law, I had a career as a computer programmer and have a master's in computer science. But what I did as a programmer is I was a system programmer on IBM mainframes in assembler language. So I kind of grew up with this stuff. But what's different now is, and I think we look at this slide, it's very important because we see a difference between the public cloud that are all identified there, Amazon, Google, a hybrid cloud, the combination of the two, and the private cloud on premises. And so depending on what requirements you have, you may have a combination of all those, depending on your business. So what we need to look at is, what agreements do we get? Now, this agreement is something I negotiated for 7-Eleven a few years ago when they wanted Google Maps, a new license. And I got the 6-page agreement, but the important part was not the 6 pages. The important part was I had to look at 18 online terms to figure out exactly where all the terms would be, because things would change coming and going. And so I think it's critical that if you have these online links, that you take the time to look at them. And then the other thing that goes along with it is they change from time to time. And I know that we don't really spend much time thinking about it, but I'll just give you an example. My law firm years ago, we had a 3-year contract with AT&T for internet services. And the contract we signed said that at the end of the 3-year term, when it renewed, it would be for 1-year terms. Well, they changed the online terms and said, no, whatever the original term is, then it would automatically renew for the additional that same time. So instead of being a minimum of kind of a 4-year contract, it was a minimum of 6. So it's kind of complicated to get out of that deal when we decided we were changing. Now, everyone watching also is well aware, I think, that Amazon is the largest cloud provider in the world. And I think the reason for that, we all know this, is they have so many computers in their retail business and everything else, that this is excess capacity that they've gotten into. They have free services, although if you want certain features, like you want your data to be in the United States, for instance, or you want certain backup procedures, you may pay a premium, so you may have to negotiate those. But they also, in the customer agreement, they also update the last time they provided new version. This one, November 30th, 2020, I think was in large measure because of the California Consumer Privacy Act. and they wanted it to keep it up to date. So let's look at a couple of the provisions that are included that that is we, the customer, are responsible for backing up and securing the data. They don't take any responsibility for that. Also, they're not responsible for indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or exemplary damages, or they're also not liable for any obligations under the SLAs for unanticipated or unscheduled downtime, or a portion of the service for any reason at all, or the cost of procurement of substitute services. Also, what we're looking at was generally what's used in the United States. There's also, you can see this particular version is for the operations in India. So that's a separate contract term. And then there's also got this European group, but look what they call Europe. It's a lot bigger than Europe. It looks like it's about half the world, but that's what Amazon calls it. So I guess we'll live with that. Critical part associated with all this that I think everyone is well aware of is the service level agreement. Now, just as a matter of reality, I don't think it's an agreement. I mean, I know that's what we call it. I think it's an IT phrase because when I talk to other lawyers, they don't understand that it's really not a contract. They think because it says service level agreement that it really is a contract. It's really not. It's providing services and when it's available. And you can see the kinds of issues that are included in that. Now, what I like to do is my standard kind of boilerplate is system availability of 5 nines over a rolling 30-day period. And I don't think you'd ever see anything more than that. One of the reasons I use the rolling 30-day is because if you do it on a calendar basis, as opposed to a rolling 30 days, the vendor could be down one whole day, and then the next month the clock starts over again on them. And I don't think that's right. I think it should be on this rolling 30 days. Every vendor's a little different on how they negotiate it. But if we look at Wikipedia's association of the availability, you can see that 5 nines, it could be down 5.26 minutes a year. Well, if that's the kind of business you're in and you need it, that's critical. That's only 26.3 seconds a month. But on the other hand, 95%, which is probably the most common one that we all run into, you'll be down for 18.26 days a year. And if that happened all in 1 month, you could go out of business. So this is really important for you to keep into account, because being down 36.53 hours in a month may not be terrible, but I had a hospital that didn't have availability for 27 consecutive hours. So they had patients that needed the medical data and it wasn't available. So it varies all over the place. Also, AWS has 122 different service level agreements. So it's not just one, you get to pick one, you get to pick the ones that are appropriate. I have a client that's in the HVAC management business, and they use 15 different service level agreements from Amazon. So depending on what the service is, then they have different terms. So for instance, their backup service level agreement, you can see they are willing to give a 10% service credit if they're between 3 nines and 2 nines, but 100% credit if they're down less than 95. But remember what I said before, they're less than 95. That means they could be down for 36.53 hours in 1 month. Like I say, that could destroy your business. So these are critical measures. Also, something else that is critical and more important every day, I think we are also super sensitive to cyber issues, is they make a big deal, and I think they should, about the fact that they are AICPA SOC compliant. And then they have a great deal of explanation. So you can learn if you don't know the difference between a SOC 2 type 1 or type 2, you can look it up and they help explain it, and then they tell you what is involved in it. Also, depending on the actual service, they may be in the international arena because some of their operations are outside of the United States. So they may want to be ISO compliant. And then they tell you which particular services are available on which different service cloud. You see these across the top there, so that they have a large number of compliance rules. And if you are operating outside the United States, it may be critical that you can prove that they are ISO 27001 or 213 compliant. So those are the comments I have today, Caren, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have that it may have been raised in your brain when we went through this today.
Well, that was certainly a lot of information to digest. And just so that the viewers know, we will be sharing out a copy of the slide deck. But I was going to say that there was a time when I really didn't pay very much attention to the terms of services, but since I got to know Peter, and full disclosure, I have been Peter's client, that he's really taught me a lot about this. And it's something that I realize how utterly important it is to do this. And so I do it, or I get my legal team. And I would suggest, things are so complicated these days, you are well advised, I think, to get legal assistance on that.
Well, and then let me make a comment, because I've run into this recently that I was a little bit surprised about. That topic I discussed briefly about the SOC and ISO reports, what I am finding is oftentimes lawyers never look at that. They have internal auditors that do that. But I would encourage everyone watching to say to your legal department, you take a look at this and read it, because the first 20 or 30 pages of most of these SOC reports are business information about the vendor. It isn't about the audit results. It's about how are they conducting business, what countries they're in, who are the different parties that are involved, whether it's on-prem, colo, or whatever. And so it's really important from a business standpoint for the lawyers to understand that. And I encourage everyone to get your legal team involved reviewing those, because in today's cyber world that we're living in, I think it's essential.
No, I absolutely agree. So thanks, Peter, for giving us all this great advice, but we are going to continue the discussion on how you evaluate potential providers with regard to data protection. That's going to be the subject of our next podcast. So again, my thanks to Peter for joining us today. And this is Caren Shiozaki. Please be sure to join us again next time. If you have any questions, please email them to digiriskSig@simnet.org. We'll be happy to get the answers, and they will be posted on the DigiRiskSig website. And again, this podcast was produced in collaboration between the Dallas-Fort Worth SIM Fellows Group and the SIM DigiRiskSig. Thank you.